Nora Bateson, and I'm here with Marlon in the STEIM guest house in Amsterdam, and STEIM is the studio for electro-instrumental music.
Good!
And, it's actually an artist group that has a terrific history of all kinds of really great heroes of mine, like Brian Eno and Laurie Anderson, and amazing 80s and 90s and 2000s artists. So it's an honor to be here.
Yes, it is, and thank you to STEIM for allowing us to be here. And so please tell us, give us a little bit of context of what you're doing and what are you doing in Europe now, and in the context, of course, of your work with your film.
Okay. I guess the term is on tour. I think I'm on tour. And I use the term kind of loosely because I never ever anticipated that this would happen. I made a film about my father called An Ecology of Mind, and it's a film that addresses some fairly complex ideas, but it addresses them through the lens of a father-daughter relationship. And for me, the film is about the way we see the world, and there's no question that part of the way we see the world is through our relationships. So when I made
that a very important statement.
Yeah, that's a very important statement.
Yeah.
And if we could do more of that, I think it would alter some of the ways in which we approach things. Little things like the way we make breakfast or talk to our kids, and big things like geopolitical strategy, ecological endeavors, and so on. It's something that that matters.
Yeah.
And we're not used to looking at it. So what's unusual about the film, and what was unusual about my father's work, was that he had a kind of innate ability that he spent a lifetime honing and cultivating, so that he could focus on those relationships between things. And when I say relationships, I don't just mean boyfriends and girlfriends. I mean the interrelationships of the natural world, and then how those relate in terms of communication patterns and interaction patterns in all sorts of different modalities, from biology to psychology to technology to ecology and so on.
Can you tell us a little bit the name of the film and a little bit of the history of, because it's, a lot of time has happened, since Gregory Bateson did an incredible amount of works and writings and in different kinds of work in so many different fields, and practically 40 years later, in certain ways, there is this, I would say, new energy or revival. And in my pet theory, I think that has to do also with your work. But tell us a little bit more for other people that we might know who Gregory Bateson was, or
okay, who was Gregory Bateson is a big question.
Besides your dad.
Yeah, he was my dad.
Yeah.
He was an anthropologist, and he was a psychologist, and he was an information theorist. He was at the beginning of cybernetics. He became an ecologist. He was a humanist. He was a thinker. I think most importantly, if I were to describe him, I would say that he was somebody who came from a background of both science and art. And not that he was an artist, but that the arts were important to his family. And that he looked at the world through a particular lens, and that lens was one of how things come to order. How do things come to be? And what is the nature of that order? And when you start to really look at that question, it becomes a question certainly of biology, certainly of patterns, certainly of communication and the relationships between things. And so everywhere he looked, he was looking for the same thing. It's a mistake to think of all those different professions as being different endeavors per se, because really what he was doing was using the vocabulary of each of those professions to enhance his ability to communicate an integrated whole. The next question that you asked me was about the title of the film, An Ecology of Mind. Yeah. Okay, so given that his perception was based on a kind of, I like to say that for him the world was unseparated to begin with. And for me it's important to use that word unseparated instead of that it was whole, because we've separated it. And it's very difficult for us to even begin to think of even identifying anything outside of the separations that we've created. So he published a book called Steps to an Ecology of Mind. I think the book came out in '72. It was a series of lectures. And each of them was looking at different aspects of the way that things are interrelated. So cultural interactions within the aesthetic, ecological interactions, the nature of addiction, how biological evolution takes place. For all intents and purposes, if you were to look at the table of contents, you'd think the thing was just like a Jackson Pollock painting of ideas splattered on the wall.
But there was something that connects.
But there's something that connects, that's right. And so let's talk about the title, because the title I think is a good place to start. And I want to say what that term means to me. Gregory's not around to say what it means to him, so you're sort of stuck with my interpretation of it. And this is what I feel about that term. It is an invitation to look at the ideas that we have in our heads as coexisting, co-evolving, and in relation to each other, so that the ideas that you are holding are actually operating in reaction and in relation. Some are thriving, some are not thriving, some are really just beginning, like seedlings, like a garden. And some are composting, and some we frankly wish would compost. But the point is that the ideas themselves are moving, and they're in relation to each other. They're in an ecology, like a pond, where there's balances and there's a sense of well-being that it happens within a set of thresholds of balance and imbalance. And that's an important idea, because what that means is that ideas change. And I think if I were to really look at what are we struggling with right now, one of the big questions is, how do we make change? How do we change the way that we think? And our underlying feeling so often is, well, you can't change that. You can't change the way you think.